Hello, this is Bill Cecil, and welcome to episode number 21 of my podcast series, Best Year Ever or Bust. The podcast series designed to help make every year as a teacher your best year ever by helping you help your students make it their best year ever despite any and all challenges you encounter along the way. Best year ever or bust, baby. That's the winning mindset I'm looking for you to develop this and every year in your classroom. And it's also the goal of this podcast series, which is to help uplift, motivate, and empower you to take on and deal with the many challenges that come with being a teacher. Again, I want to thank you for taking the time to listen to this podcast series out of your busy schedule. I know how busy teachers can get, especially this time of year. So thank you for doing that. And also, I want to thank you for continuing to be the hero you've been called to be by striving to make a positive difference in the lives of your students each and every day they enter your classroom. And finally, I want to give a huge thank you to those of you that are taking time to share this podcast series with other heroes like yourself to help them stay strong and make a positive difference in their students' lives as well. So if you recall, in episode 20, I explained that I want to spend a few episodes reframing how you will look at and approach any of the remaining challenges you'll encounter after being able to minimize and eliminate many challenges by implementing the 3 doable plans I shared with you throughout the first 19 episodes. The first doable plan was designed to help you as the leader of your team to help build your students into a winning team and to create a shared vision or mission that they're all going to work in with you together to help create and to complete during the school year. Like all the targets go in the same direction. Remember, we want everybody going in the same direction so everybody's engaged and working together. And also, I want you to be able to do that in a positive, safe learning environment. And that means that you're going to definitely have rules in place to support that. And you're also going to have incentives to work on to help keep them doing that, but also procedures. Remember, I talked a lot about procedures. So these were the 4 strategies I gave you to help build your team into a winning team and going in the right direction. And then the second doable plan was really what you gave to your students, which is a 3-word doable plan to help them make every year as a student their best year ever, and even to carry beyond school and into their life. You're going to give them a 3-word doable plan: attendance, attitude, and effort that will help them succeed every year in school and beyond. And then the third doable plan I provided you with was for you to use with your students' parents to help team up to build that bridge of support between home and school that you'd be working with together to help your students be able to have their best year ever, and also to help them create that lifelong love of learning that will help them succeed every year in school and into their adult life. Remember, research showed that the more we get parents involved and the longer they stay involved, the more positive effects it has on their children. I love the one especially about the lifelong love of learning, because that's going to carry well beyond your years with them as their teacher and will set them up for success the rest of their lives. So those are the 3 doable plans I gave you. So what I also mentioned in episode 20 was that even after you get all of those 3 doable plans in place, and believe me, that's going to minimize and eliminate many of the challenges in your classroom that many teachers face that don't do that. But at no time did I ever want you to think that best year ever equals perfect year ever or challenge-free year ever. And that's what this episode's really about. It's starting to set up for the next few episodes to talk about how you're going to deal with the remaining challenges. In the first 19 episodes, I was really trying to help you minimize and eliminate many of the challenges. But now I want to focus on how do you deal with the challenge that you still have in place. And so I really want to help you reframe how you look at challenges as you start to move forward from this point on. And so as we move forward, I want you to start seeing challenges. Some of the challenges, by the way, there are certain challenges I want you to eliminate and to minimize. And that's what we've talked about. Things that waste time in your classroom, things that are holding your kids back from you from teaching and your kids from getting to learn. So those are challenges we definitely want to, get rid of. Things that are just there to frustrate you or waste time in your classroom. But now I'm talking about certain challenges that will help you grow. And there are challenges that will absolutely do that. You need challenges to grow. And so I want to focus on these challenges as something that you, instead of wanting to ignore, run away from, you want to embrace and you want to take on. Instead of seeing them as dead ends, you're going to change your mindset to see them maybe as possibilities to create a new defining moment or a life-changing event that's really going to become a blessing more than a curse. All right? I'll give you an example. When I was a kid, I remember in 8th grade, I had moved from from Georgia back up to Chicago, and we had moved a lot, and so it's hard to keep these all straight. But I was going into 8th grade, and the summer before 8th grade, and we had moved back from Atlanta to Chicago, and I didn't make a lot of friends that summer, and a little bit introverted at first, and not real outgoing until I get to know you, and then you have a hard time believing that. But I had not made any friends over the summer. My mom was concerned, and so she said a couple of weeks before school, I see that the sports are starting up in 8th grade. You can join some teams, and I'm going to give you a choice, and you're going to choose one or the other. You're either going to join soccer or you're going to join football, but you got to make a choice because we got to go sign you up tonight, so you can get started. And I was like, I don't know if I want to do this. And I'm like, fine, I'll go sign up for football because it seems like more kids do that. So we get there, and the secretary says to us, oh, I'm sorry, that started a week ago. I guess you could try to still sign up. We could try to talk to the coaches. But I do know soccer is starting tonight. And I just looked at my mom and said, I'll go with soccer. That's fine, because I didn't really care. And I didn't want to be the guy that walks on late and they have to beg the coach to let me on, and the coach is already looking at you like, oh boy, here we go. Your parents are going to be those types of parents that come in and tell us what to do. And so I said, I'll go with soccer. But at the moment, I just thought, great, here comes something I don't want to do. But I chose one and I went with it. And again, I'm a 100% all-in type person. Once I'm in, I'm in. And soccer all of a sudden took off in my life, and I was playing more and better. And by the time I got to high school, I was starting to even be captain of the team sophomore year. And again, my senior year, I was starting to learn how to lead and be a leader on the team. And it was starting to get fun. I was building up my confidence. I was making friends, all these great things. But when my coach said, as we were getting ready to move on to the college ranks, he kind of insinuated certain players he thought would play Division I, and my name wasn't on that list. And that really upset me. And I didn't even want to go to college, but I knew right then, I've told you, I decided I'm going to college. I'm going to find a Division I school that will let me play soccer, and it happened to be Western Michigan. It's the only school I applied to that when the coach said he'd give me a chance, I said, I'm in. I applied to WMU, and it was shortly after that, within a season, he noticed that I was really good working with kids during our camps when we did summer camps with the kids, and he said, you should become a teacher, and that led me to him encouraging me to take my first teaching class. And I did, and like I said, I never looked back, and it's totally changed my life. All of that because of a challenge that my mom put in front of me, and instead of saying, I'm not going to do it and dig in and just say, I'm going to fight you on this, I said, okay, fine. And then I took one, and once I took it, I made the choice. I was 100% all in. And so this is something I want you to really see is challenges don't always have to be energy drains or something that kills our spirits. In fact, sometimes it can be something that actually fires you up inside. It lights that fire in you, and it stokes that spirit in you, that fire in you to want to come out and do things. So I encourage you to see challenges sometimes as a game or a competition, something to compete against, something to try to beat or to overcome, to be victorious in the end and to be the hero of your team. This last one is what made my job as a teacher so exciting. I love to compete against not other teachers. That's not what I was competing against ever, but to compete against any and all challenges that tried to come between me and my students having their best year ever. I loved facing challenges that were going to try to beat me or hold me back in some way. And as a teacher, there was no way I was going to let challenges interfere with my mission for my team and hurt my teammates. No way. And so it became a game or a challenge and made my career way more exciting. And this is what I want you to start seeing some of the challenges you face. Because too often in education, I hear us just talking about challenges, and when we do, we hang our heads or we sound negative when we're talking about these challenges. I also want people to hear the energy that comes from us or the passion that says how we're going to take them on and do something with those challenges to help elevate us or elevate our game and help elevate our students' game as well in the classroom. And so, as I mentioned in episode 20, I hated playing in soccer games where the team that we were playing against was no competition for us at all. I hated that. It made those victories feel shallow. Nothing to feel proud about. The games that were the most exciting for me is the ones where we went in as underdogs and we left as victors. Somehow we overcame the challenge of that team that we were facing that was better than us, and we found a way to win. Now, those are the games that I still remember and take great pride in today. And that would never have happened without challenges to overcome. Can you imagine if you knew that every single time you went out and played on a team, you were never, ever going to lose? You're never going to lose another game again in your life. I think that would start to get boring. Or if you have a favorite sports team you like. Right now, people in Michigan are going crazy about the Lions because they're 2 games away from the Super Bowl. And this is a team that's never made it that far, ever. And so people are really excited. But 3 years ago, this team had only won 3 games. You talk about overcoming challenges. That's the exciting thing about watching sports. You see stories like this, and these stories translate into our own lives. And I want you to see that as a teacher, that it's stories like this that people will be talking about for many, many, many years to come, or your students will be talking about, or you'll be talking about when you're talking about your own teaching career. But that's why in education, I always think of this as, even with all the challenges, as now's a great time to be involved in education, because if we can do something special during this time to overcome these challenges and elevate our game and help make education really stand out, like those billboards, the teachers in those billboards I talked about way back in episode number 8, right? That we truly do make a difference every day. That's something that I want you to start approaching these challenges with. Now, I know some of you are thinking, Bill, you sound like it's all been so good for you. It's not been hard. Challenges are hard. And you know what? They have been hard. And I promised you in episode 20 that I would start sharing with you some of the challenges that I have faced as a teacher. And so I gave it some thought, and I thought, you know what? I'm going to skip giving you a bunch of little challenges I face. I'm going to go to the granddaddy of all the challenges I faced. And I want to share with you not just a year that was challenging, but I want to share with you a year that was my most challenging year ever in the classroom. It was a year that almost broke my spirit. I think it was a year that almost knocked me out and made me think about leaving teaching, at one point in the year. I'm not proud of that, but it's true. I'm human. I get knocked around too. So some challenges will knock you around, but it's that overall best year ever bust mindset that's going to carry you through the day. And so I want to tell you this story because it's a true story. This took place around my 28th or 29th year of teaching. Remember, I taught 31 years in the classroom, if you forgot. And so, but it was near the end of my career. And it makes sense because near the end of my career, I was already starting to have self-doubt a little bit deep inside of me. Like, my goal was always, I want to leave education on top of my game. I want to leave teaching at the top of my game. As much as I loved it and I couldn't imagine leaving it, I knew I was going to leave at the top of my game or near the top of my game because I didn't want to be like one of those aging athletes that stays on too long, or even teachers. I recognized that maybe some of them stayed on too long because they started to sound bitter or angry, or they had changed and they started to complain about everything or yell at their kids more. And I didn't want to do anything to tarnish the legacy I'd worked so hard my entire career to build up, that I was a teacher that truly loved doing what I did. I didn't want to do anything to tarnish that, or worse, to have it affect my students in a negative way. So I was starting to wonder during this year, is it just my age? Is it starting to show? Am I going to start losing my level of play that I'm so used to playing at and my passion for this? So I was already in doubt about that when things started to go wrong. And I was facing the normal challenges during that year, but there were a few added challenges on top of those normal challenges that really increased, I think, the stress level for me and the frustration. And so some of those challenges, just to give you an idea, we were just like now, we were under a lot of pressure of testing. The MSTEP in Michigan, we gave it twice a year, and there was a lot of pressure to get those scores up, get the scores up. The scores were so important that we spent too much time, in my opinion, at times, that we were working only on getting them ready for the test, getting them ready, prepping them for the test, MSTEP prep. We were learning how to do new technology that would help them to monitor their own learning, or we could get their scores faster so we could know what to work on. These aren't bad things necessarily, but there was so much coming at us so fast. And they were also asking us to start doing more scripted teaching, which really irked me because I felt my creativity in the classroom was what made me special and what makes every teacher special. It's their own passion that's coming through, what they love coming through their teaching, right? It's that passion and love for learning that the kids, you want them to catch on. But they were wanting us to be scripted. And I was finding ways around it. I was still finding ways to infuse my creativity into it because I was not going to let anything get in the way of me and my team. I already talked about that. But it was a lot more work. I was getting older as a teacher. I was getting tired faster. And so I was coming in earlier, going to bed at night at 9, which is unheard of for me, and getting up at 4 a.m. to get myself to school by 6 so I would have time to get organized, because I knew I needed that time, because by the end of the day I wouldn't be good at it anymore. I could see these changes taking place. But I have to tell you that the biggest challenge of that year was that before the year started, we were given a group of students we're a 5-6 building. They were coming from the elementary buildings, and we had 3 elementary buildings, and we were hearing from all 3 buildings that this was the most challenging class any of these teachers had ever faced in some of their careers. And so they were telling us ahead of time, oh boy, here you come. This is going to be like the tsunami of challenges you've ever had in your classroom, because these kids are a challenge. Every grade, or that they went through in these elementary buildings, this was the group of kids that are the biggest struggle I've ever seen. They made it sound like if you had looked over at their buildings, you would have seen smoke coming out of those buildings the year that those kids were in their schools. This irks me, obviously, when people come up to me and say, oh boy, here you go, Bill, what best year ever, let's see you do it this year, ha ha ha. That, in a good year, that bothers me. But this year I was hearing it from everyone. Even our administrators were talking about, you have to be ready for this group. We've heard, this. They were already besmirching their reputations before they even got to us. So I was more determined than ever that I was going to make this a best year ever winning team. And sure enough, it was happening. But by the time spring break rolled around, I was worn out. I was like, for the first time in my career, I was like a boxer on the ropes, just absorbing punches, trying to make it to the end of the round. Spring break, I remember, was my crisis point. I literally didn't know if I was going to even make it to the end of the week. And nobody would have known this on the outside other than my wife, because I was, putting on that face, that game face, every time I walked into my school. I'm not going to take it out on my kids or let my staff see this. I'm a leader. I felt like one of the leaders on the team. So I'd come in and give it my all. But I was that boxer on the ropes. In fact, the only way I can explain this to you, to really get a sense, I'm going to post a picture of my son and I when my son just turned 30. This tells you how old I am, man. I haven't said that in a while, but I'm old. He was just a little guy at this point. He was like, a toddler, young. And he had this little red boxing gloves that he would put on, and him and I would sometimes pretend box in the house, and he'd knock me out. I'd be on my knees and he'd end up usually knocking me out, go figure. And it was just kind of a game we'd play. Well, I was in a soccer game during this time, and when he had these boxing gloves, and I was in an indoor soccer game, and believe it or not, I'm 100% all in, even in soccer. And I ended up running for a ball in a championship game, sprinting all out to get to the ball to try to get a shot off on the goal. And I was running full blast. I stepped on top of the ball, and it propelled me into the wall, into the checkboards, and that they would use like in hockey, if you're trying to imagine what it looks like. It's like an indoor hockey rink, but with grass on, or turf. And it propelled me into the wall before I could put my hands up, and I went face first into the wall. And I think it temporarily almost like knocked me out at first, because I just remember being on the ground and people helping me up, and they were freaked out because I had a big knot on my eye. And when it sank down by the next day, you could see the blood, but it was all dark, and it was like the most beautiful shiner I've ever seen. And I'm in a lot of pain. But I remember I thought it'd be funny, sometime during that black eye period, for my son to put his little boxing glove up to my face and look like he had given me the shiner. And so he took a picture of that. So I'm going to put that on my resource page. And what it symbolizes for me is what teachers sometimes feel like. Sometimes we feel beaten up and beaten down. And I'm one of those teachers. There's many times throughout my career I had those moments. So I'm not trying to give you an impression that everything was hunky-dory, perfect. But what I want you to also do, if you have a few minutes, I want you to pause this, and I want you to go to Google, and I want you to Google Raging Bull, hey Ray, you didn't knock me down. Hey Ray, you didn't knock me down. And it should pop up this little film clip. It's like 3 minutes long. And what I want you to do is Google that and watch this clip. Now, I got to tell you, it's kind of a brutal clip. I'm not going to lie to you. It's pretty intense. But it's not a video clip you want to show little kids. But the reason I want you to see this clip is because it has my favorite actor of all time in it, Robert De Niro. And this is why I know this clip existed, because I went to the movie Raging Bull back when these things were in the theaters. And I went to see Raging Bull with Robert De Niro. And it's a boxing movie about this boxer named Jake LaMotta, who he was playing, but all I could see in the movie was, Robert De Niro. Robert De Niro's getting in the ring. Come on, Robert, and I couldn't separate it because I'm such a Robert De Niro fan. But there's a scene where he's fighting Sugar Ray Robinson, one of the greatest boxers of all time. And this was a true story. And again, it's Jake LaMotta fighting him, not Robert De Niro. But in the movie, he's in the ring with Sugar Ray Robinson, and Sugar Ray Robinson has him against the ropes. It's late in the fight, and you can see that Jake LaMotta is totally getting beaten up. I mean, he's getting not just beaten up, he's getting beaten by this boxer, this much better boxer, Sugar Ray Robinson. And he knew his goal at this point was he wasn't going to win the fight, but he wasn't going to get knocked down or get knocked out. He had the fighter spirit. He had the best year ever bust baby spirit. And so what he did was they show him putting his arms on the ropes as he's getting beaten so he wouldn't go down. He wraps his arms around for the final barrage of punches that are coming his way, and he wraps his arms around so he can't fall down, and he gets pummeled. I mean, and it's a little gory, but he gets pummeled. But at the end, when the bell rings, Sugar Ray Robinson goes off with his arms up, knowing that he just won the fight, and he's sitting there on the ring, just barely standing, and he's pummeled. And he lets down, his trainers come over and they help him, and he walks across the ring. But he walks over to Sugar Ray's corner before he goes back to his corner. And he looks at him and goes, hey, Ray, you didn't get me down, Ray. You didn't knock me down. And I translated that to here in my mind. Best year ever or bust, Ray. You didn't knock me down. You didn't knock me down, Ray. Best year ever or bust. And it was sometime during that week when I felt I was actually going to get knocked out. I remember thinking of something that happened to me very similar when I was my first year teaching and I almost got knocked out. So imagine I'm having this really tough week and I'm just feeling beaten up and beaten down. My kids we're doing test prep. We're also doing parent-teacher conferences that week. And on top of it, so we have to do report cards, get those ready, and then we have to stay after school until 9 o'clock at night. Some nights getting our conferences done. 7 or 8:30 at night getting our conferences done. By the time you get home, it's 9 o'clock. But we're beat. So teaching, doing that all day. And this is not a young man's sport anymore, and I'm beat. I am just out of gas. I felt like I wasn't on the ropes. I almost felt like I was on the canvas. Trying to make it to the 10 count, get up to my feet and make it to the corner before the 10 count so I could have spring break to recover and come back and try to get through the year and figure out what I was going to do. It was that bad. And that's why I want you to see this clip in this picture. But it was when I was on my back on the canvas, so to speak, during that week, that all of a sudden I had this flashback of my first year teaching. And I want to share this story with you because it was the first time I think I really got knocked down in my teaching career. It was on a Friday morning. I had walked my kids to their special. I worked in an elementary school, it was Winans Elementary. And so I had walked I had fourth, fifth split year that year of kids. I walked them down to their, I think it was PE class, and I was walking back to my classroom. And one thing I liked about the elementary buildings was you had the little wee wads running around the school. And, when I worked in a 5-6 building, I missed that. But during this time, my first year, these little kids were running around the building too. And so it was really cute. It was like the kindergartners up to my level, And so I was walking back, and sure enough, this little group of, I think they were first or second graders, came walking down the hallway like little ducklings. They were like these cute little ducks walking behind their mama duck that was in the front of the line. And this group, I have to tell you, I was impressed with. They were in a single file line, all eyes looking forward, and nobody was talking. It was amazing. I didn't want to cut their line, so I let them go by. And as they were going by, I'm just looking at them, smiling, because they're cute and they're little kids. And all of a sudden, one of the kids in the middle of the line looks up at me, kind of turns his head sideways, looks at me, smiles, and waves real quick, like he broke rank. And I kind of looked real quick, and I waved and smiled. And sure enough, it's like the domino effect. The next kid does the same thing. The next kid looks at me as he walks by, smiles and waves. And then all of a sudden, sure enough, the third kid, this time, smiles, waves, looks at me, smiles, waves, and then giggles. And all of a sudden, it's game on. Every kid behind them, they're still walking single file, looks at me and starting to giggle as they're waving, as they're going by. And I'm sitting there like quickly waving, smiling. All of a sudden, the line comes to a complete stop, almost like in a comedy, like the Three Stooges, when one stops and they all go banging into the other person, like, no, 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 right? And that's what happened. And all of a sudden, they all stop and look forward. And I look forward too. And the teacher standing at the front of the line, glaring back at the students, I don't know, me, all of us, glaring, and stands there like she's really upset. And all of a sudden she just goes, eyes front, single file, let's go. And she turns around and they walk off like little ducklings with their, had just been scolded. And they go into their classroom. I see them go in their classroom, door shuts, and I kind of walk back to my class. Don't give it another thought. Sure enough, end of the day comes, and here comes this teacher. This teacher, by the way, had never once, my first year of teaching, introduced herself to me, never once came up to me and said hello. She was an older teacher. She seemed kind of grumpy, I have to admit. And so I stayed away from her. In staff meetings, she always kind of gave off of that vibe. So I just, she doesn't want to talk to me. I'll just stay away. I got plenty of other people that are helping me out. Very, very positive building. So I'm not going to worry about it. Well, she comes into my room, we've never even spoken, and she looks at me and she goes, "What do you think you were doing this morning?" And I said, "Excuse me?" I mean, she has a head of steam. I mean, full force. She comes in my room. "What do you think you're doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm sorry. Look, I'm sorry if I disrupted your classroom. That wasn't my intent. Somebody waved, I waved back. I was just waiting for them to pass so I could get back to my classroom. I just dropped my kids off at PE, so I apologize if I did disrupt your class. That wasn't my intent." She goes, "No, let me tell you what you were doing. You were showboating. Oh, look at me. I love teaching. I love teaching." And she's just over-exaggerating it. "Look at me. You got to quit showboating. That's what you got to start doing around here." And I said, "Look," and this took some courage because I'm a new teacher. And I said, "Look," because I was also about ready to start crying, to be honest. I was like, "Oh my gosh, she's attacking me." I said, "Look, again, I apologize. I didn't try to disrupt your kids. I am sorry I've said that. But I will tell you, I will never apologize for loving what I do. I love teaching, and I love this, and I'm not going to hide that from anybody. So that I won't do, but I do apologize if I disrupted your classroom." And she turned around and she started to walk out of my classroom after staring at me for about 10 seconds of awkward silence. She starts to walk out of my classroom. She stops again. She turns around one more time. And this time she points her finger at me, like straight out, like she's almost like, and has a little shake to it, almost like she's putting a curse on me. And she goes, "Just you wait. A few more years, we'll knock that enthusiasm out of you." And she turns and walks away. I got to tell you, this was a defining moment in my life. I remember sitting there right then and there, feeling like she just knocked me down to the canvas. But as I'm lying there, metaphorically, I'm thinking to myself, I made a vow right then and there. I will never, ever let anyone or anything knock the enthusiasm out of me. Because if they do, that's the day I walk out. That's the day I retire from teaching. That's the day I will quit, because it wouldn't be fair to my students. It wouldn't be fair to anybody else if I lose my enthusiasm or my passion for what I'm doing. So I will never let anyone or anything ever knock the enthusiasm out of me. Now, I know some of you are thinking, he retired, so did that finally happen? No. It didn't happen the year that I was just talking about, which I'll finish up telling that story here in just a second. But I left because I taught another 3 years, 3 amazing years, and I decided I was going to leave like I promised, on top. 31 years, I felt, you know what? It's time. I've done it. I've done what I came to do. And I think if I stay too much longer, it will just start to diminish from what I've built. And I don't want to do that. I want to leave on top like I've always promised. So I kept that vow too. But what happened was, when I was on the ropes that year back going into spring break with that really tough group that had really turned into a best year ever group. This group was a really special group. They bonded. Just like I remember, the reason I got so worked was because in high school, I remember they told our class of 81, again, I told you I'm really old, class of 81 in high school, they pulled us in an auditorium at the end of our freshman year and said that we were the worst group they ever had come through in all their years. I don't know what they did by doing that, but one thing, I'm sure it wasn't what they wanted. Yeah, what it did was it united us. It bonded us. Cliques went out the window the rest of those 3 years. We were all tight. Yeah, we still hung around with the people that we did activities with and things like that. But we treated each other like we're a bonded team. We're a band of brothers, so to speak. And I got to tell you, I'm not super proud of this now, but we sort of raised some hell throughout high school. You know, you knew when the class of 81 was present at something. And so, but it did just the opposite effect, the way they handled that. It didn't help us change our behavior, but it helped to bond us. This class I had in that year that I was talking about going into spring break, they really bonded in my classroom. They bonded with me because I think they heard somebody that really believed in them and told them right from the get-go, your past doesn't equal your future. We're going to have our best year ever. And they bought into it. They were thirsty for it. This team, even though they were challenging at time, and with all the imp step going on and time in front of a computer and not getting to do some of the creative things I wanted to do, I felt that partly was my fault, but it was wearing on them. And spring break, and we're doing prepping for tests that they were going to do right when they came back. They felt that pressure too coming on. But even then, they weren't the problem. They were a challenge. And the challenge was I had to put out a lot of extra energy to get them built that year. So yeah, it took more work. But I'll tell you what, the reward was they were one of my best groups ever in my mind because they overcame the biggest hurdle from where they came in with that reputation and where they left. And so it ended up being one of my best year ever because in that moment, like I've told you before, something amazing happens when you commit. When I was there that like Wednesday before we were going to get off that Friday, it was like that Wednesday, all of a sudden I decided I'm going to renew my vow that I'm not going to let anyone or anything knock the enthusiasm on me. So get up and start taking it on again. Get the fight back in you. And that fight came back in me. And right away, it's like the universe, whatever you want to call it, started putting pieces in front of me. I remember getting home that night, and I got a call from a professor at Ball State University that I was friends with from speaking in her class several times throughout the years. She asked me, she had an emergency she had to attend to, and she couldn't get a sub for that Friday. And she had 3 groups of classes of educators coming, young educators coming into her class, and she couldn't get a sub and asked if I would be willing to come down and step in. And we didn't even discuss what I would talk about or what they were learning. She just said, "Can you do it?" And I said, I'll be there. As tired as I was and as beat up as I was, instead of going home that Thursday night and saying, spring break is starting, I was driving down to Ball State University to do 3 one-hour classes the following Friday. And that's quite a drive. But I was there and my mindset was already changing. And I remember I was driving down. I was on this road just driving. It was late in the day and cloudy out. And just as it was getting towards sunset, the clouds broke and you could see the sunset in the cornfields way off to, my right. And I'm looking at them, and all of a sudden this calmness, this peace came over me. And I was like, I don't even know what I'm going to talk about tomorrow. And it came to me. You're going to share with them the 3 biggest things that impacts it had on your career to continue to make every year your best year ever. So just go and talk about that because it's in your heart right now. It's what you're trying to remember so you can get yourself through this. You've been on the ropes. Maybe they're, going to hit the ropes. They are someday in their career, so maybe this is a chance to do that. And so that's what I decided to do. And the sessions were great. Not only was it great for them, it was therapeutic for me, and it renewed my vow and my game plan of what I was going to go back and do, and ended up going back and having a great finish. And then I even went and spoke about it a couple years later. The year before I retired, I was asked to come in and do a keynote opening day again, which is kind of dangerous because I'd done that way back when I came back from Teacher of the Year in 2004. But they asked me to do another keynote, and I got up and actually told pretty much this story to them about how most people think, because I have best year ever every year, that I don't have any challenges. And I want to share with you a challenge I recently had that almost knocked me out of the profession, and I don't want it to knock you out. And so I'm sharing that story with you today that I shared with them when I gave that keynote. So I'm going to end pretty much there for tonight. But what I'm really trying to do is get you to understand that it's how you look, how you reframe the challenges you're going to face. And we have more to talk about. And I'm going to give you specifics and start talking more about strategies again. But I want you to really get this in your mind that it's how you look at things that make a difference. It's that 100% all-in attitude. Stick with it. Don't give up. And amazing things will start to come in your way that will help you get there. All right? So I do encourage you to make the vow right here and right now, if you haven't already, that no matter what, you're never going to let anything or anyone knock the enthusiasm out of you. Have that competitive edge in you that says, I've got that fighting spirit. I am not going to let that wear me down. And then renew that vow as often as you need to whenever you're on the ropes or you're down. Go back and watch that clip. Hey, Ray, you didn't get me down. Best year ever bust, baby. So I might go watch that clip again right now. I've got fired up talking to you guys about it. So I might have to go check it out again. But until then, think about this mindset and really just remember, best year ever. You have the power to make it happen.